Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Rachel Martin of Oceano Winery out of San Luis Obispo County. That's in the Central Coast, but you're going to tell me a little bit more about that. So, Rachel, welcome, and tell us about Oceano, if I said that correctly.
Thank you. The name of the winery is Oceano, or it can be pronounced Oceano. See, the town of Oceano, California is, it's a Spanish word. And so there are many, of course, Spanish-speaking people within California and specifically within that region. But there are also a lot of people who do not speak Spanish. And so since it really mirrors the word ocean, and so people that English speakers call it Oceano. So I go back and forth. It really depends on who I'm speaking with and whatever their preferences are.
Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about where you're located and what you're doing there.
Okay. We are it's a different plan. So our vineyard, which we source our fruit from, is called Spanish Springs. And it is in the county of San Luis Obispo. It's right outside of Pismo Beach, which is within the county. It's 1.5 miles from the ocean, which makes it arguably the closest vineyard to the ocean in the state of California. This is why I'm making wine from there.
And the name makes so much more sense.
Yes, exactly. I want the name of our winery to reflect sense of place and the culture. So our tasting room is located in San Luis Obispo, not the downtown, but the city of San Luis Obispo near the airport. San Luis Obispo has a new revamped airport for wine tourism, really is what they're looking for. And then our wines are made in Napa.
Oh.
So we are, and I live in New York City. So it kind of makes sense if you look at it that way. Our winemaker is based in Napa. He's been making wine for over 20 years there. His name is Mark. He's also our consultant. So we produce Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We go through multiple harvests because we have multiple clones of each grape variety, and we harvest at 3:30 in the morning, and we finish before sunrise. All the grapes are in a refrigerated trailer, and then they go directly to Napa, specifically Coombsville, where we custom crush at Italics Wine Growers.
Yeah. And what's your total case production?
In 2019, we'll have produced about 1,250 cases, which is the largest so far. We started the company in 2016. And I say we, it's me and my husband, Kurt Deutsch. So we started in 2016 with 350 cases of Chardonnay. Then in 2017, we increased that volume to 600. 2018, we added a Pinot Noir, which is 230 cases. And so now in 19, we've increased both of those to larger volumes.
Doubling and growing at astounding leaps and bounds.
Well, since I do so much travel, I'm able to distribute and visit markets, and we've had a lot of success. And we've been able to, widen our footprint, and so therefore I need to produce more wine.
So how wide is your footprint? What markets are your wines available in?
We are in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Texas, and California, and looking to grow.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's a lot for a little winery.
Yeah. And for a short period of time as well.
Well, tell me, you're new to making wine, and you live in New York, so I'm not sure your background, but what is your first memory relevant to wine?
I started drinking wine with my mom. My mom was in the food and beverage industry, and we were in California at the time, and this is, I don't know, it was probably like 9 or 10 or something. And she did a lot of wine tastings, going to tastings. She worked for a hotel group, and so she attended those educational, informative tastings. And so she drank wine at home. So that's my first memory, first experience. But I've been growing grapes and making wine for the last 15 years. My family owns a winery and vineyard called Boxwood. It's located in Middleburg, Virginia. I went to school at the University of Bordeaux for wine and France, and then I also went to Napa Valley College, all to prepare myself to run my family's new winery. And so in 2005, I took the position of executive vice president. I built the brand, expanded our distribution, became internationally recognized, and I wrote an American viticultural area called Middleburg, Virginia, which went into effect in 2012. So all of these steps led me to Oceano, but it also it afforded me the opportunity to own my own business and to make decisions that I could have full ownership of, which is stylistic decisions, what I wanted to make, how I wanted it to be made, how I wanted it to be branded and promoted, and really to have something of my own.
And what drew you to this particular area to source fruit from, considering that you had access to grapes in Virginia and obviously you're on the East Coast and you're making wine in Napa? What drew you to San Luis Obispo?
It was a bit of a coincidence. I think a lot of these things kind of are. So going back to Kurt, I met him in 2014, and he had spoken about a vineyard that his dad's friend owns. And I just kind of brushed it off, blew it off, didn't really pay a lot of attention because Kurt's not in the wine industry, and I figured he had no idea what he was talking about. But later I met this gentleman. His name is Henry Warshaw, and Henry owns Spanish Springs Vineyard, and he invited me to take a look at the vineyard, which was in 2016. He was going back and forth about building a winery, and he just really wanted my opinion. So I flew out April of 2016, and I was just astounded of the terroir. So I know a little bit about that since I wrote an ABA. And the soil combinations are very exciting. Limestone, marine shale, sandstone. It is, as I said, 1.5 miles from the ocean. It's a very cool climate. It's the coolest climate in California, and it's the longest growing season. So we can get lots of flavor, high acid, a lot of salinity. And I knew right then and there I could make a wine that I dreamed to make. And so and listen, I thought about this project for a long time. I knew I wanted to start my own company, and I thought about New York for grapes, and I thought about other regions. But when I visited Spanish Springs, I knew that was the place. And so I returned. I was living in Virginia, running the winery. I returned, talked to Kurt, and immediately we formed the LLC and started, we contracted for 6 tons of Chardonnay, hired a consultant, had to figure out where to make the wines. But so that's why we make wines in San Luis Obispo, is because of how fabulous it is, and because of Henry.
Are you doing all the fruit that he grows, or is he also selling to other people?
Spanish Springs is 91 acres. Okay. And so it has a potential for about 18,000 cases. So many other small wine producers or medium size are buying fruit from them. The vineyard was planted in 2007. And so we are looking forward to purchasing more.
So you've obviously spent a lot of time in the wine business, either as a consumer, also in the industry, and have probably tasted a lot of great wines. Is there one wine that stands out as sort of that aha moment? Do you remember the occasion, what that wine was? I mean, there might be more than one, I'm in fairness, but...
There isn't one wine, but I grew up drinking very good wine. So my mom eventually married my stepfather, John Cook, who owns Boxwood Winery. John's been a collector of great Bordeaux wine for a very long time, since the 60s. And so John would share those wines with us at dinner. So I was, drinking Mouton. I was drinking, the best of the best, first gross, second gross, third gross. And so that was my education of fine wine. Thank you, John. And then I went outside of Bordeaux and tasted and drank more wine. And, I look for wines that are elegant, have structure, that have an acid base, and just wines that pair well with, that enhance a meal. So, I love certain regions. I had a Sauvignon last night, 2014, and it was perfect, absolutely delicious. And that was my wine for the night. And I'm happy with those individual moments.
And so, having expanded beyond Bordeaux and drinking all these wines, if we were to come to your home, to your cellar, what would we find in there?
Well, I was in San Luis Obispo a couple weeks ago, and my friend took me around to Paso Robles, and I was interested in what they were doing east side of Paso and west side of Paso. And so I bought a ton of wine. And right now, that's what is in my wine cellar in the apartment. But Italian wines Barolos are like just a big love of mine. So you would find Italian wines and some California wines, but I'm learning. I'm always learning. So I'm buying wines to drink, to enjoy, but I'm also buying wines to learn.
And is there anything in particular that you've opened recently from your cellar that was giving you great pleasure?
Well, the most remarkable of the year would probably have to be a Mouton 1971. So my stepfather sent it to me on my birthday. There you go. Just the secret's out, the year I was born. But and I was worried that if it was going to be good or past prime. So I invited some friends over who could truly appreciate it. And I actually went out and bought a Coravin just for this bottle of wine. So I didn't have to be with all those people at once, right. But I could. So yes, that was the most memorable wine of the year.
And how was it at 49 years old?
It was delicious.
48 years old.
It was 40. Thanks.
No, I had the same year.
No, just joking. Just joking. I actually don't care. But it was amazing. It was elegant. It had so much freshness, and it still had fruit, and so it was really delicious. But Cheval Blanc is also a great wine that I still drink a lot of Bordeaux.
But you're not making Bordeaux.
No.
So my question for you is this: do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, there's just varieties that you like. And so I love Pinot Noir because of its elegance. And for me, it's not something that I have a long history of drinking, but it's something that's really captured me. And I find it delicate, delightful. But I also love Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because you can really sense detail in those wines. And so it's also new for me. In Virginia, we grow Bordeaux grapes and white and red and make blends. So this is a complete departure, which was good in a way because they're not competitive with my family's wines.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a small producer, and obviously you have two wineries, so experiences from a larger sized winery on the East Coast and then a smaller winery that you've been growing. What's your opinion on wine critics and scores?
Well, I mean, I like wine critics. I like the people. I know a few. And scores, I don't like... I mean, I think blind tasting is an important exercise, and I actually enjoy it. I like to blind taste. It's fun. But I think to really rate, I don't love ratings. Okay. And it kind of, I think I understand why people rate wines, and I understand why wineries want their wines rated, but it doesn't make the wine taste better. And I think there's a lot of pressure and stress around ratings that are not enjoyable. But I don't always like highly rated wines. It all so much depends on the reviewer, the rater's own palate, not necessarily what they like to drink, but what things taste like to them might taste differently to me. So a world without ratings, I'm not sure, but I think recommendations would be really nice.
So talking about recommendations or just personal preference, red, white, or rosé?
Red.
Still or sparkling?
Still.
See, easy questions.
Yes, but I do it's like, I love them all and I love sparkling wine, but if it were my last glass of wine,
it's going to be red.
It's going to be red, and it might be a Pinot.
So, growing up drinking Bordeaux grapes, Bordeaux blends, and moving into Pinot and Chard, I mean, you obviously cover a wide swath of flavors and textures. When it comes to pairing wine and food, how do you approach it? Do you just open up what you want and pair, throw caution to the wind, or do you have a little more systematic approach? Do you think there are rules to follow, or are the rules of kind of white wine and fish and red wine and meat archaic or useful?
I think they're useful, but I don't think they're necessary. And I don't think that it does any service to the enjoyment or pairing. To have rules and to strictly abide by them is not a good idea. When I look at pairing wines, I like to cook. So I'll think about something that I'm going to cook, and then I'll find the wine to pair with that. And if there's a wine that I'm dying to have that's on a wine list, I'll make my selection of what I'm eating based upon that. But I drink white wine with red meat, the little red meat that I do eat. And I drink red wine with, I just think what you have to look at is your acid, your sweetness, your tannin, the age of the wine, what herbal character is in the wine, and match that. Is there a lot of vinegar, and that's never good, or is there a lot of citrus in what you're cooking? And so I look at ingredients, and I look at the way that the method of cooking, and that's how I pair my wine.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure of tasting your wines yet, the Oceano Wines, which I'm having the pleasure of sipping right now, but for someone who hasn't had that opportunity, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, they're missing out on tasting coastal wine. So, and they're missing out on California, a style of California that is lesser known. When I offer my Chardonnay to the average drinker, they tell me they don't like California Chardonnay. I get it all the time. Or they don't like California wine, or they don't. So if they're not tasting Oceano, they're missing out on what California has to offer in more of a delicate profile. Now the region, so our appellation is San Luis Obispo County. We're not in a sub-AVA of Central Coast, which is an American viticultural area. However, there is a new proposed AVA for our area, which we are in, the vineyard is within, and that's called Slow Coast. It's been accepted by the Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, has not gone through the rigorous steps of the acceptance and publishing an AVA. SLO stands for San Luis Obispo Coast. Every vineyard is within 5 miles of the ocean. And so once that comes to be, then you're going to be able to associate that terroir with these wines that are being made from within. So yeah, I think once that happens and people can start paying attention to Slow Coast, then they're going to it'll be easier for them to understand and be educated about the wines that are coming from there.
A sense of place.
Yeah.
So if space aliens were to land on your property today, which of your wines would you present to them and why?
I would probably do the Chardonnay. Not sure why. But I think...
Because it has great mineral aromas and it smells kind of like the ocean?
Because I think that the Chardonnay is more... It's easier, it's very flavorful. So it would be easier for them to comprehend. And then the Pinot, it's Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir would be maybe, it would inspire more thought.
So you have a few years experience with these wines here in California, but have started to see some vintage changes. And then obviously you have experience with Virginia and seen the variation. Overall, do you think that, we know there's variation from vintage to vintage, but do you think that there's more similarities, that there's more consistencies, or how disparate is one year to another?
The wines, for me, always have to have a similar profile year to year, no matter what. My goal is when someone drinks my wine, they can identify it as Oceano or Oceano. So I would say vintage to vintage, there isn't that much of a difference in California where we are. So you have more consistency than Virginia. Virginia, every year is different, but you have your soil and you have your microclimate and you have your methodology of making wine. So you're still able to have an identity of what your wine represents. Now, since Oceano is a new project and we are not, so within the vineyard, the plant material is outstanding, as with our vineyard in Virginia. However, we're using multiple clones for each variety. So in 2016, our Chardonnay was clone 76, 17, and 4, and we performed 15% malolactic fermentation. So we learned from that, and there are other clones available. So we decided clone 76 wasn't bringing anything to the party. So we replaced it with clone 809, and this is 2017. And then we did 0 malolactic. So that's a change, it's an evolution. And then in 2018, we decided not to use any clone 4 and to replace it with clone 96. Still 0 mallow, a little bit less aging in barrel. And the wine is still our wine, but we were looking for a little bit more finesse. And that's how we did it. California's Chardonnay is really a clone 4. That style is clone 4, and I decided it wasn't representing my ideal. Then in the Pinot Noir, Swan and 115 are our clones. I love bright, refreshing Pinot Noir, lots of red fruit, low tannin, and so we went for that to start. Now in 2019, we added clone 667 and clone 777. So those wines are all in barrel, and I taste them periodically throughout the process with our winemaker. And clone 667, we're definitely love it. Like, I love it. I even love it more than the clone 115. Clone Swan is amazing. And then clone 777 might be a little bit too aggressive for my style. We'll see what we do with that. So there is evolution for us. It's more of an evolution than it is a vintage difference.
Mm-hmm. And so as you're figuring out the different clones you want to use, and as you're, honing in on your style and perfecting it, have you established any sort of traditions that kick off harvest? Do you guys have any rituals?
Well, I fly out from New York, and I don't really. My ritual is to be in the vineyard when they start harvesting in the middle of the night, and I watch everything, and I try to take some photos, and then I might follow the truck up to Napa, depending upon if we're harvesting If we're harvesting right away the next day, I won't follow up to Napa because I really want to be on site. My winemaker, I trust him implicitly, so I know he can handle anything. But sometimes there are decisions that need to be made that should really be my responsibility, no matter what it is in the process. And that's what's so great about working with Marbu, is he involves me in all of those decisions, even though I'm not on site all the time.
So when you were a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think because of our, age or whatever, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I think it was Indiana Jones that made me want to do that. So hi, Gen X. So that, and and then I ended up having a passion for photography. So I went to school for fine arts, and I started at Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara, and it was just too commercial for me. And then I finished my studies at the Museum School of Fine Arts in Boston, and I had a career in photography as a photographer right before so photography and then wine. Mm-hmm. So that was, and it still is a joy for me. It's a passion for me, and I do a lot of my own photography for my branding.
Very interesting. And when you're not working, how do you spend your free time? I'm going to assume you take a lot of photographs, but what else do you like to do in your free time?
Well, I like to spend time with my husband. He has a very exciting life with musical theater. So with my spare time, I accompany him to do those things. But the arts is very a passion for me. So I go to art exhibits and such, but I also love to travel. I mean, I think everybody loves to travel. I travel to Mexico a lot. I love Mexico. I love the culture. I love the food. I love the people. And so we travel. We need to decompress. Both me and Kurt. We both have stressful careers, work lives. And I create my own stress, so I realize that. So we travel, but Kurt and I were married in 2018.
Oh, you're newlyweds.
We're newlyweds, and it coincided with the release of our first vintage of wine, so it's a super beautiful thing. So yeah, I try to spend, and of course, my family. My parents live at Boxwood on the farm in Middleburg. Boxwood's kind of cool. It's very cool. It's a historic estate. It's also on the National Register of Historic Places. Wow. But we all have homes there. So when it's just like this commune, and when I have free time, I go down to Virginia to spend my days with my family, and of course all my friends. And another thing I like to do is I like to go to horse events. So equestrian, all things equestrian.
You're from Middleburg, Virginia. Yeah. That makes sense.
All things. So we, my friends, we go to steeplechase races. We go to polo and all those things. I don't fox hunt, but I embrace my friends who do. I'm not a horse person myself. I used to ride and compete as a younger person, but now I just spectate, and it's really just a social gathering for me.
And so as a newlywed, I'm sure you said you like to cook earlier. So if you were planning a romantic evening for you and your husband, whether at home and cooking or going out to eat, what sort of wines would round out that romantic evening?
Most likely we would start with a white Burgundy. I love Chablis. We would, look around in that. And I love, if I were at home, I would select the same wine if I were out, unless I couldn't get, the great thing about drinking out is the vintages. If you go to a specialized restaurant, you can get really remarkable vintages.
Yeah.
I love fish. It's what I want to eat all the time. I love oysters. So I pair with that, but Kurt likes things that require more robust wines than what I eat. So he loves Brunello di Montalcino, and I love Barolo. It's like case in point. But so when we go out, we do like to drink Barolo. We do, and at home as well. But I might just do something special. Of course, I love red Burgundy wines. I have less of an education in that, and Marbu and I are going to Burgundy early in 2020. He went last year for some courses, so we're going to take some classes together.
Wow. So looking back at your career or at your life, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice that you ever received, and from whom?
That's hard to say. I know advice that I would give, but advice that I've received, well, the source, my mom.
Of course.
And I think it works in business too. Not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. There's one, and then just keep your head down and just keep working hard. Now, that's my stepfather. Advice that I would...
Yeah, that's my next question is, since that's rolling off your tongue, feel free to share some advice.
Right. Would be, it's so hard not to be number one. I'm always striving for the best and to get the first place. And I would say the first place is meant to be shared, and it doesn't always have to be you. So it's not a failure if you weren't, picked for the all-star team.
Wow, that sounds like a Gen Xer talking to another generation. So when you look back, obviously this brand is very young. You've been in the wine industry for a bit longer and had a career before. When you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Writing an AVA that was accepted and put into effect is a huge accomplishment for me. I worked with a lot of people, soil scientists. I had to learn programs like GIS technology to map out all the soils. So it took me 2 years to write it. So there's that. And then, building something from nothing. So Boxwood started as an idea, and then it went to a vineyard, and then it was a winery. Then we were making wine, but you've got to sell it and you've got to brand it. And I was very successful at doing that, and I'm very proud of that. And then starting out with Oceano, quickly we have a very positive response. I think it's the culmination of everything that I've done in my life, and I would say even with arts and actually who I am as a person. You know, these are really reflective of that.
3 great accomplishments with many more to come. So if you could imagine a scenario where someone was drinking your wine at a restaurant and the paparazzi were snapping a photo through the window because this was someone of significance, who would you want that person to be drinking your wine? Living or deceased, from any walk of life, is there one person you would love to see with a bottle of Oceano in their hand?
Well, I don't know if everyone is still consuming alcoholic beverages, but I would say Tina Turner is a pretty good one.
Huh.
I would love to see Tina Turner with the bottle of my wine. I think she's the greatest.
Wow. That is not an answer I've ever gotten before. I like that. So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Is like an ocean without a boat.
So you are probably seeing a lot with climate change going on. We're not gonna hide the fact that there are temperature changes affecting. Do you think we'll be drinking wine in 500 years' time?
I'm so afraid because making wine in California and growing grapes in California, it's scary. All the fires. So in 500 years, I don't know if we're going to be existing on the planet. That's how I feel. In 50 years, I think that the growing regions are shifting. So you're finding wines to change what, the vineyards being able to produce differently than they had in the past. So I think you're going to maybe have new wine regions. So if we're still on the planet, I do think that we'll be drinking wine. I just not sure where.
So if unfortunately, we were coming to an end and you were sent off to a deserted island, I have to ask this question. What are the 3 wines you'd take with you?
Well, I'd take an extra brut Blanc de Blanc champagne. You have to have champagne. And then I would take, it's really funny. I mean, I would take a sparkling, a white, and a red. Okay, we'll start there, right? So the white wine might be, I would take maybe a Grand Cru Chablis. I would probably, that's what I would take. That's what I would take. This is, of course, if my wines weren't in arm's reach, right?
Of course.
So, and then I think for red wine, I would take Nebbiolo. I mean, it's my favorite. I hate saying favorite, but it's like,
it has a special place.
There's just something about it. I get so much joy out of drinking it. And so the aromatics are wonderful, and it's elegant and it's elegance and finesse. Like those wines are just they're dreamy.
So I didn't warn you about this, but we play a little game towards the end. Wine soundtrack. So we talk about music based on some of these wines that you just spoke about, as well as your own. I want you to tell me what you'd want to be listening to or what it makes you think of. So let's start with that Brut Blanc de Blanc.
Brut Blanc de Blanc. I think it needs to be like party music, right? So I need, like, if I'm going to be on that desert island, like, it's got to, like, have a great, like, soundtrack. And So I mean, maybe some like cool, like chill, like maybe some house music, you know, or something like you feel like you want to throw on a dress and like dance in, you know, in heels and
And then you were talking about Nebbiolo with all of its finesse. What would you pair with Nebbiolo?
Maybe like a symphony, you know, some classical music. Yeah.
And then your Chardonnay, which I've got here, that has great mineral characteristics, salinity, some nice fruit aromatics.
It's a very happy wine. It's net. So maybe like some, you know, flamenco guitar.
As you sit out looking out at the ocean.
I'm just thinking of like being in Central or South America or something like that. Yeah.
And what about your Pinot Noir?
Oh, Pinot.
The Oceano 2018 Pinot, to be specific.
I'm laughing. Like, maybe like, you know, something like old school rock and roll, like the Rolling Stones or something.
Okay, I tortured you enough. I won't ask anymore.
I don't know.
So
That's
this
my husband, and he would tell you some show tunes.
So this is an easy question. Of all the wine regions in the world, what's at the top of your list that you want to go visit next?
Well, Burgundy is my plan. Now, after that, I would probably say Greece. Yeah. I kind of love the Assyrtiko grape, and so I want to learn more about that. And I love the food. It's Greek food. It's just unbelievable. I have a friend that Loy Estiatorio in New York City as her Greek restaurant, and so she's cooked for me a lot, and I've had quite a few wines. So that's my next spot after Burgundy.
Well, fantastic. So for somebody who might want to plan their next trip to San Luis Obispo County, where can they find you and can they visit you?
Well, you've got to email me. So, or contact me on my website, which is oceanowines.com, because I'm in and out. You know, I have a tasting room, but it's not open to the public. So when I'm there, I taste with people, and it can be, you know, my wines can be purchased on my website and picked up locally in San Luis Obispo. I have a pickup point. But, you know, since we're so new and young, I don't have a lot of places that currently carry our wines in that area. So it's a little bit difficult to find.
So appointment only to visit you, or go on the website and send some wine.
Yeah, go on the website and buy it. Contact me. Eventually, sometime in 2020, I will be open to the public.
Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack. And again, remind people your website and if they can find you on social media.
Yeah, Oceano Wines is my social media handle. So find me there, and my personal is Rachel_Oceano. And, you know, I'm posting some personal stuff, but really it's my journey. It's my journey with the wine.
Well, thank you for sharing your journey, and we'll keep following along.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.